So thank you everybody for being with us. This is Stefano Mazzarino, Geopolitics from Italy. We are trying this experiment tonight because we will have a stream on both channels, also with Ian, a New World Econ War Report. Ian will join us later. We have also the Russian dude that it's just arrived, so welcome. And today the panel is very Russian. So we have the Russian dude from US or Canada, where you are? From Canada. Okay. We have Konstantin inside Russia from Uzbekistan, Anatoly, Karlin, actually I think UK, and Eirik and the tanks that is from France. So me and Eirik, we are the only two not Russians on the table. So the majority is Russian tonight. And we started this panel just to make a little bit of chatting and geopolitical analysis of the actual situation with different, let's say, point of views of the situation. I will give immediately the panel to the Russian dude because it's like the first time that we saw him. Like to make a point. If you have any type of question, I will stay in the back for the people that is watching. Just put it in the chat and I will collect it and give it to the people. So welcome to everybody. And if you want to fastly present yourself in a round, and then we will start the roundtable. Go.
Okay.
Russian dude, it's your turn.
Okay. What's up, everyone? It's the Russian dude, Canadian Russian, living in Canada right now, being originally born in Russia, completely devastated with the situations in Ukraine, obviously. There is no way to support this. I have no idea how people in Russia still think that this is normal. The level of propaganda is insane. And pretty much, yes, since the beginning of this war, the goal of my project on YouTube is to make people aware of the situation in Ukraine and obviously to try and defend in some way the reputation of Russians, that being Russian does not mean that we unconditionally support our government. And that's pretty much me.
The mic is off?
Yes, looks like Jules, your microphone is off. It shows even.
Stefano, mic is off.
Yep.
Sorry. Eirik, it was like for you a little presentation.
Oh, okay. So I'm Eirik from the Instagram page Eirik and Tanks. I update about military history and history of the 20th century. And for like 2 years now, I am focused on the war in Ukraine, far before the invasion with the war in Donbass. And I report daily updates on stories and posts. And in September, I went on the front line to take photos. I was in Kharkiv during the offensive. And I think that's pretty all.
Okay, thanks. Konstantin?
Howdy, my name is Konstantin. I'm the host of Inside Russia channel. Born and raised in Russia. I spent a good part of my life in the USA, returned to Russia, and then I've been working in construction all my life until this tragedy started happening in Ukraine, when I made my personal mission to somehow, well, first of all, to shed light on what is happening in Russia, because not much is known in the Western world. And second, somehow try to bridge Ukrainians and Russians, rectify to fix what's been broken, one person, one family at a time. That's what I'm doing here in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, streaming daily, giving updates from Russia, on Russia, and what's happening about Russia, and being an activist in general.
Anatoly, only to present yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I'm Anatoly Karlin. I was a blogger at the Doomsday View. I left a couple of years ago, so since then I've been blogging occasionally at my Substack, although not regularly. Most of my commentary on the war has been on Twitter over the past year, as well as on various podcasts. So basically, I'm just as the guys, my commentary on geopolitics, I just currently try to neutrally and assess the situation, which right now seems like a stalemate, most likely. And since it does seem that the most likely outcome, given that the offensive capabilities of both sides have seemingly dropped to near zero, right now it seems that the best option is to force through some kind of peace treaty.
Okay, thanks everybody for the presentation. We are still waiting two guests, so we are trying to let's start before them. New World Economy and of newsforthought. So if I can start and make this roundtable that it's working, Russian dude, Eirik, Konstantin, and Anatoly Karlin. And if you want to enter, just ask. I will not stop. About your opinion of the actual situation. Let's say what I wanted to start about. The interesting things for me was for talking with Konstantin and also with other friends that have in Russia about the actual situation of the forecast of the revenue of oil and gas after January. This is a data that for me it's very important to analyze, just to understand. Let's say how much the Russian Federation can manage the amount of money that is not coming in the GDP and in the federal budget about oil and gas. In an official, let's say, communication that was on TASS about the Minister of Energy of Russia, in January there was a -43, -45% of revenue less of oil and gas export. In your opinion, what could be let's say, the answer of the Russian people of a situation where the federal budget will be for sure cut? I don't know how much in the next months. The Russian dude, if you want to.
Well, I'm mostly following the military conflict. So whatever is going to be talking about right now about economics, financial situation, is just going to be my guesses and assumptions. So it might be all inaccurate, it might be wrong, but I still present it. So long story short, yes, one of the biggest parts of the Russian budget is the natural resources, oil, gas, and everything. So obviously European countries, they were trying so much to establish the ceiling prices, or whatever it's called in English.
Price cap.
Two price caps, yes. So for the natural resources, Russia said we're not going to sell if you're not going to buy at our prices. And long story short, the more and more European countries, they started to get away from Russian resources, energy resources. North American countries, America itself as well, if I'm not mistaken, also started to get rid of Russian oil and everything. And so pretty much this was just yet another bluff of the Russian government trying to manipulate another countries, European countries, Western countries, by saying if you don't play our game, we're going to ruin your economy, so you're going to put sanctions against us, but it will be you who will be struggling. And so far it does not look like it's going to happen. So pretty much my opinion, it was just yet another bluff which other countries were able to discover, and it did not work in favor of Russia. So that's what I think I would say.
Konstantin, if you can add something.
You know what? I covered just about everything else that the Russian dude doesn't, but I don't cover what he covers. I'm not an expert on military. I know just in general what's happening in the front lines, and I know it more from emotional point of view. But I can give you the scoop on the economics and about what's going on with Russian economy in general. Since we talked last time, there was new data out. Couple news. First of all, yesterday, Vladimir Putin they made a new law that actually allows to make some statistics. The Russian government allows Russian government to make some statistics secret, confidential. Okay, and this is made just for the purpose of keeping the truth on what's really happening in the Russian economy from the Russian public. Okay, this is major. Okay, we still have some data coming out from international agencies, and we just have numbers out from the International Energy Agency, which data I trust. According to them, compared to year-to-year basis, in January, Russian oil and natural gas export collapsed by 38%. And it means that Russian budget is going, it was in red by 1.9 trillion rubles, and it will continue to be in red in February by a huge amount. And it's just trouble for the Russian economy. Okay, it means that the problems are not on the horizon, but they're right now, right here. People in Russia are already experiencing them. Russian ruble started losing its value. It's lost 33% in the last 4 months. Okay, big trouble. And what's going to happen? We're going to start printing money, turn on the printing press. Inflation is going to be going up, and Russian people will definitely feel it. Will they do anything about it? Most likely not.
Anatoly, if you want to add something of your point of view.
I expect most of these assessments are a bit too much on the apocalyptic side. At the end of the day, Russia has a $2 trillion economy in nominal terms, 4 trillion in purchasing power parity terms. Even Iran, which has twice less population and 3 times less economic activity, it has survived for 40 years under pretty extreme Western sanctions. So a Russia that is has a significant domestic economic activity. Most economic activity is domestic, plus does have lingering linkages with China, with India, because most of the world outside the West isn't interested in participating in sanctions. I just don't see where the collapse is going to come from. If you're speaking about the short to medium term, does the budget debt was low and the budget was balanced before the war. So again, Russia started off with pretty fiscally healthy position, not in terms of institutions, obviously, but in terms of fiscal health. It was a good start. And if anything, the big problem with the way Putin is conducting the war from an objective perspective isn't that the budget has turned red, but that it's spending less than 10% of GDP on the war, whereas to win, it needs a war economy. So that involves spending more like 15 or 20%. And so long as it doesn't do that, I don't think that it's reasonable to talk of any prospects of military victory on the battlefield, because it's either that or NATO-scale Chinese aid, in my opinion, just to match what the 100 billion per year or so that Ukraine is receiving in military aid from NATO. Now, the main problems and my concerns with the Russian economy are long-term. So basically, that's 2 things for the most part. That's technological convergence, because it's increasingly cut off with technology, and over a number of years, that's going to create an accumulating negative effect in terms of, not just the IT industry, which has already significantly left Russia, but also like core industries such as oil and gas, which also need constant technological upgrades. So is China going to fill that gap? That's an open question. And the other point is also, as was alluded to by Konstantin, was some degree of institutional degradation with the state statistics, some aspects of state statistics being made secret. One part of that. Another part was the de facto legalization of corruption on the part of Duma deputies and so forth. I mean, obviously, Russia did not start off the war as a sort of like a transparent, like paragon of transparency, and it's going to get worse rather than better by judging by developments to date. So I would say my assessment is that the main problems are long term, not short term or medium term.
Perfect. Now the answer was very...
May I ask? Pardon me. May I ask a question?
For sure.
The previous speaker, have you ever been to Iran?
No.
I have. And I've heard the opinion of many people saying, well, look, Iran's been under sanctions for 30 years, 40 years almost, and they're doing good. They have survived. Trust me, if you come to Iran, you will see a very sad sight. Okay, they're not doing well. They're not starving to death, that's for sure. But as a country, as a society, they're not doing.
I didn't claim they were doing well. So.
Well, they survived under sanctions for so many years. They barely surviving. That's not a good example to follow.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a great example to follow.
Just to clarify.
It is a middle-income country which sort of does produce, I think, something like close to 1 million automobiles per year. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to live there as a consumer or in general. But I mean, it's not like some sort of absolute black hole in terms of.
Well, it's pretty close to black hole. Just go and check it out. See in your own eyes.
If I can add something to this, it's very interesting for me that I was watching a video about the aspect of democracy, of not demography in US, China, Russia, and also Europe. And it's very interesting that the demography of China and Russia, it's very bad for the state of for the same in Germany, for example. We have a lot of old people and not a lot of young people. Something that in US it's still not at the same level because we have a lot of immigration, young immigration from Mexico and whatever. What I wanted to arrive fastly is that probably China will not grow as we are used to see in the last decade for the next decade. So if there is such a form of an agreement of alliance between Russia and India or China, what I can say in my point of view is that the consumption of oil and gas or any energy commodities that is produced by Russia cannot be exchanged from Europe and China and India at the same amount. So the question was, if I have to cut off my budget, do you think that the Russian people can exchange their style of life in a sort of a partly degradation? Let's say that I have to cut off my expenses for 20-30% because inflation and the salaries is going down. I'm asking to you all three because you are Russian, so you know it better.
Could you please specify the question? Say it once more.
The question is, because the war, I think, in my point of view, can have a degradation when you don't have the public support of your people. So, do you think that the public support of the people in Russia can be degraded by the, let's say, degradation of the internal economy that is slowly going down?
Let me rephrase, as I understand. If you say if I'm right, the vanishing political, lowering living standard will bring vanishing political support, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The question was this one.
Okay, who's first?
I don't know.
Okay, I can go.
Yeah.
So long story short, it all comes back to once again the Russian propaganda, because unfortunately, yes, you can put the economy on the military tracks, which just basically everything for the front lines, like one of their favorites slogans from the Second World War. Everything for the front lines. So yeah, obviously, if you just do it right away without any preparations, without any brainwashing, of course, people will be very upset. Like, how? I don't want to pay more taxes for like war in another country. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I have my family to take care of. But you strategically prepare people. You say, here are these neo-Nazis, drug addicts in power. We're liberators in another country. It doesn't make sense, but that's what they say. And so long story short, by preparing people in advance, by saying this same thing over and over again, 24/7, radio, TV, internet, social media, everywhere, slowly people get used to, okay, so maybe I can contribute. Maybe if I only pay like 50 rubles per month additionally in whatever taxes, maybe it's not going to be that much, but it's going to contribute a lot. And so by preparing people in advance, it's gonna get more easier for the government in the future to introduce these taxes, to take to increase the military spending and things like this. And this is pretty much what basically is happening. If you do it right away, people are gonna be upset. But if you prepare them in advance, they're gonna be maybe like, it's okay, I can contribute a little bit. They're not gonna be too happy, they're not gonna be too sad. And like, even if there's going to be some protests on the streets, unfortunately, as you know, the last 20 years of Russian protesting, unfortunately, it's not going to last more than 1 week, and the Russian government perfectly knows this. It's not perfect, obviously, it's not good, because people need to show their position. They need to speak with the government and everything. But unfortunately, that's how the mentality of the Russian people at this very moment. I mean, we cannot change anything. The government is so powerful. So yeah, I can go on the street 1-2 times, but then, I mean, I'm just a small person. What can I do? And that's the unfortunate mentality of the Russian people.
Konstantin?
I actually went to the streets a few times not too long ago in Russia. And it was scary as hell, but I did it. So I understand exactly how Russian people think when they go on the streets. There are two groups in Russian society right now. One is larger, another one is smaller. The larger group supports the war, supports the government, and basically the brainwashed group. The smaller group is against the war. A lot of people have left from that group, left Russia, myself including. And well, quite a few still staying in Russia. The larger group will not change their support to the Russian government and to the war, because I absolutely agree with the Russian dude. The propaganda works very effectively in Russia, and of course people will be angry. They will get angrier and angrier, and yes, if they live in standard drops, then that's not good. But it's not going to be the fault of the Russian government in their heads. It's going to be the fault of the evil, satanistic West and Nazis. Okay, and this is exactly how I think, and this is exactly how Russian government engineers their minds. Okay, and the smaller group, of course, well, they don't have. The government does not enjoy support of the smaller group at this point. There's no support whatsoever. So that will not change, okay? And I will give you one real-life example. I have been given it in my streams quite a few times. I do not believe that Russian people will, well, something will happen, an event will happen that will actually change Russian people's minds, due to one single reason. September 21st, mobilization announced. And everyone starts freaking out because everyone knows that in Ukraine there are many deaths of Russian soldiers. And with my eyes, I saw a situation. A small town near Rostov-on-Don, And there is the main square and the buses from the mobilization office when come up, along with police cars, a few of them. And they're right there in the main square. And people, families, mothers and fathers, bring in their children, 18-year-old kids, 19, 20-year-old kids, I don't know. They're bringing them and they give them to the buses. They cry. I mean, no one likes that situation. They cry. Both men and women cry. They understand that the kids are in grave danger, but they bring their kids with their own hands and they give them to police and the Voenkomat and mobilization center people. Nothing in our lives is more valuable than our children, okay? And if you give out your child with your own hands to the government, nothing in your life can be any worse, okay? So the Russians have already gone through the worst and they haven't done anything and they will not do anything in the future. That is my point of view.
And I wanted to give the last word to Anatoly Karlin and welcoming also my friend from actually in Norway, but he's from Afghanistan, Asadullah Faranzai. We will make a stream exclusively to him because I studied with him and I found out about 10 years later that when I asked him when you were during like 2001, and he was living in a village next Tora Bora. So Sadullah, later if you want to say something about it, it's interesting. Anatoly, if you want to conclude, because
I mean, my point is very, very simple. I don't think it has much to do with propaganda because Russian propaganda, Russian state propaganda is simply very bad and that is schizophrenic. I mean, it was understandable at the very beginning. There was talk about defending Donbass, about regathering the Russian lands. Then they started going about denazification, then Satanism, then 666 genders. Interspersed with cynical stuff like the grain deals and the ammonia pipelines, deals on the side, which aren't really concomitant. I mean, these people are at the same time dancing about Satanism, but at the same time concluding grain deals and spending something like 5% of GDP on the war. So these are not exactly very consistent messages. And frankly, the Russian government messaging has been extremely low quality. So I don't really think that propaganda can have anything to do with this. It's much simpler, in my opinion. People don't tend to counter signal against their country during wartime. That's pretty universal because countries that do that, they tend to be defeated. Basically, my interpretation is that like whether the regime survives or not, frankly, depends on the outcome of the war. Because again, victory washes away all sins, whereas defeat sort of dooms you. In World War II, the Soviet Union won World War II extremely incompetently. It lost 27 million people winning World War II. But on the other hand, it legitimized the Soviet Union for the next 50 years. So probably the Soviet Union would have collapsed a great deal earlier than 1991 had World War II not happened, because it was like this great legitimizing event for it. And I think it's much the same for the Ukraine war. I mean, if it ends up as a stalemate, then I don't really know what happens after that. But I am pretty sure that if Russia does somehow end up winning, although don't see that as very likely, then I think that it will be a stable and Putinism will legitimize itself for at least the next few decades. If Russia loses, then I expect the elites to fragment and for Putin to be out of power in some kind of color revolution within 5 years after defeat. So what qualifies as a defeat? Well, I mean, obviously losing Crimea and Donbass would qualify as total defeat. Losing the Crimean corridor would qualify as a sort of like a significant defeat, but not a total one. In which case, it might have some chances. But if it loses completely, then I think it's cooked essentially.
So Anatoly, just to clarify, Amanda, I will ask something militarily about it to Russian dude. Anatoly, like in your opinion, if let's say we will make an agreement where let's say there is a sort of deal where I don't know the conflict will return back to the situation of February 24, 2022. And there will be a sort of autonomy of the Donbass under Ukraine. Maybe it could be declared, let's say, an exit strategy for the conflict for the Russians, or it's not acceptable for the government.
Well, I mean, it seems that it's not a deal that Putin is interested in taking, but I mean, if the military situation develops to that extent, then perhaps he would be forced into doing so. But on the other hand, if the military situation does degrade to that point, then would Ukraine have much of an incentive to accept those terms instead of pushing its advantage? So it's not going to be a stable equilibrium in this situation.
No, I'm asking to you this one because every time I'm making any type of interview to Ukrainian speakers, I'm asking the same: what could be an exit strategy for the situation? And the Ukrainians say to me, when the last Russian will be outside Ukraine. But the problem is that at this point, I'm still not seeing any type of preparation for both sides for a sort of a deal of any type. So
yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not a Russian government spokesperson. I think they've done the war atrociously, and I obviously don't have anything to do or I don't understand their planning processes, like even from the perspective of running a war competently. But I mean, if it was up to me to get some kind of deal done, then I would suggest that Ukraine recognize Donbass, Crimea as part of Russia, and Russia agrees to Ukraine to have freedom of foreign association, including with NATO, to the extent that it desires. So both guarantee each other's border and also bring China in. And Russia pays some amount of money. I mean, $300 billion has already been confiscated in the West. It's extremely unlikely that Russia is ever going to get that money back. So perhaps throw in that money to sweeten the deal. So I think this would probably be some kind of treaty which both nationalists from both countries would not be very happy with, but would actually be a sort of more or less credible middle ground. But so obviously, so far as both sides think that they still have a chance on the battlefield, there's not much incentive to go ahead with that. Even though, in my opinion, I don't think either side has much credible chances of making significant further military progress relative to the current front lines.
Thank you, Anatoly. For the Russian Duda question, and then we will talk. What is your point of view personally about the actual military stalemate? It could be because actually we are still watching the situation presented from both parts about Bakhmut, and it seems that is falling every day, but it's not falling. The Ukrainian propaganda, let's say, is presenting it as like Bakhmut walls on the Ukrainian Telegram channel. But it seems that at the moment it's, let's say, completely surrounded, maybe north, south, east. This battle can change really something from the battlefield, or let's say the Ukrainians are, in your opinion, are preparing something different about the strategy, maybe to cut the corridor in the south?
Okay, so yeah, obviously everyone's favorite topic, activity in the east around Bakhmut. So Bakhmut, how long Russia has been trying to capture this small settlement, which is not even that much strategically important. 7-8 months, still cannot do it. Trying to surround it from the north, from the south, yes, that's what I agree. Having some advancement, especially in the north, after capturing Solidar, another city to the north of Bakhmut. The next one was Krasna Hora. Captured that as well, started to go approach Bakhmut from the north as well. Couple of days ago, Ukrainians, allegedly, most likely, they detonated a dam, which basically filled the rivers and made potential advancement of Russians from the north even more complicated than it is right now. But the situation in the south, there is a small settlement to the southwest of Bakhmut, Ivanovske, which is right on this highway, which leads inside Bakhmut from the west. And so this is where Russians were also pushing. They needed this settlement so much because, once again, this is literally a highway inside Bakhmut. Because right now it's March already started. The roads, off-road is pretty much a lot of mud, a lot of water, extremely complicated for the infantry, for the tanks, for armored personnel carriers to drive in the mud, obviously, so they need a concrete road. But Russians were trying to advance to this Ivanovske settlement on the highway. Ukrainians repelled them. And for the last week, they even pushed Russians even further away from this highway. So long story short, the only place where Russians are kinda relatively successfully attacking Bakhmut right now is from the north and from the east. From the north, once again, the dam situation, they decrease the possibility of Russians advancing in the near future because of the river. And from the east, they have been attacking frontal attacks against Bakhmut once again for the last 7 months or so. And so Ukrainians were actively repelling them. Because obviously, I think every pretty much military person can tell you, attacking is always much more complicated than defending. While defending, you just sit in your trenches, in the buildings, in your positions, like hiding and everything like this, and you don't need to kind of go. You just let the enemy come to you, to be in the open field and to attack them, destroy their infantry. And so this is what Ukraine has been doing for the last several months. Bakhmut was one of the, and still is one of the places in the entire Ukraine where Russians are suffering significant losses, as many as 1,000 soldiers reportedly, like definitely 600 soldiers on average per day. This is the official statistics from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, at least 600 soldiers per day on average been lost trying to capture Bakhmut, which is once again not even that strategically important. It might be on the intersection of a couple of highways, but according to Russian propaganda, after taking Bakhmut, this will allow them to capture the entire Donetsk region, which is once again kind of ridiculous to say. They've been trying to capture Bakhmut for 7 months, and they have like half of Donetsk region left, less than half, of course. So how long it will take them to take the rest of Donetsk? Obviously, it's not going to happen. And right now the time is on Ukraine's side, because you all probably heard about these Western tanks coming, Leopards 2 from NATO countries, all this machinery, potentially even planes in the future, in the near future. So right now, this stalemate for the next couple of months is going to be probably like this for the next month or so. It's more beneficial to Ukraine because they're defending, they're inflicting significant losses on the Russian army. Unfortunately, Ukrainians lose their people as well, but not as many proportionally to Russians. And not all what needs right now is to wait until these Western military vehicles, tanks, armored personnel carriers, they're right now being trained to use them, especially in the United Kingdom, one of the biggest supporters to Ukraine. And as soon as these Western military vehicles start arriving into Ukraine, this is when potentially the offensive, counter-offensive of Ukraine might start in the east, because by that time Russians will be most likely exhausted of these frontal attacks, significant losses, not being able to capture, advancing 100 meters per day, spending thousands of lives doing this. Definitely the morale is going to be extremely low, and morale takes a lot of role into success of military operations. So once again, stalemate is more beneficial to Ukraine. 1-2 more months until batches of tanks start to arrive. And then potentially we might see some big moves from Ukrainian side in the east of Ukraine. So that's my military overview of the east.
Sorry, if I can ask you this other thing, and then I wanted to make a question to Sadullah. If, let's say, the Russian propaganda is saying, if it's so irrelevant Bakhmut, why Ukrainian, let's say, is sending brigades to defend it, let's say, at least all these 7 months. If I can add something, this is a question from a chat. In my opinion, if I can answer to the question, and I want to also listen your opinion. It seems that Bakhmut could be like a second Mariupol, like to create a myth of the defending of the city that could be increasing the morale of the Ukrainian army. But as you said, it seems to me that the type of approach of the Russian military in the attack, it's very, let's say, expensive in a sort of human lives, and with an advance that it's constant but very slow. And so I don't know, as you said, some meters or something like this every days. And when there was the Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kharkiv, they took all this amount of terrain, if I remember right, in 5-6 days. So it seems to me that also all this, let's say, pushing that the Ukrainian is attacking on the south as a claim. It was like Ukrainian was attacking in Kherson, and then they attacked in Kharkiv. So it could be a strategy to make a bluff also in this type of counteroffensive. Asadullah, if I can ask you a question, it's in your opinion, because you are coming from Afghanistan, and what is the position of this technically global south in the situation that it's actually generated by this war?
Hello, everybody. Greetings. Sorry that I just make it a little bit late, but it's really nice discussions, interesting. I've been learning a lot, although I'm not expert of the Ukraine, but war across the world is, it's similar conflicts, if it is in Africa or if it is in Asia, but I must say that war is ugly and wish we could have peace across the world. But one thing, my friends, that my experience is that I think envision, if it is from whichever country, is not going to be successful. Like regarding my country, Afghanistan, we had 2 invasions. We experienced 2 invasions. Once from the Soviets, and they have been badly defeated, which resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then we had the invasion back in 2001 by the NATO and US. Which was also, they were like badly defeated. The agreement was actually a surrender by the Americans, by NATO, to the Taliban. And that resulted that Taliban took over militarily, and now they are ruling Afghanistan. But I'm somehow like following this Ukraine situation. I think my understanding is that this war has a direct impact on Russia, Ukraine, and the rest of the Europe, economically, politically. And the problem is that neither parties are expressing or demonstrating the flexibility, nor Putin, nor the West plus Ukraine. And I think there has to be a diplomatic solution, for this war. Because as far as I see, I think Putin, as a politician or as a human being, it's the nature. Either he is looking for a graceful exit, or he might have used other options. There are rumors floating around that he might use. I have heard from so reliable sources that he might use deadly weapons, because he was using sort of old weaponry so far. So the next option would be that he's going to use sophisticated weapons that could do more damage, and that will help them advancing, and seizing the more territory. But still, I think who is benefiting from this war economically? It's China, it's India, and some certain other countries. But I think, again, my point would be that invasion has never been successful, and it's not going to be a successful thing for Putin. My understanding is that I think Putin might be looking for a kind of graceful exit, or so there has to be, either if it is United Nations, or either, for example, India could be a good mediator because it's acceptable to both parties, to the West and to the Russia, to sort of come up with a practical, best possible solution, in a practical peace roadmap. And otherwise, this is going to be an ongoing thing, and I think it will have, as one of our friends, he pointed towards that, there have been a lot of casualties inflicted on the Russian side, but I think it's same. Maybe it's more to the Ukrainian side. You never know, because it's we know that the propaganda of West is much better and much stronger than the Russia. You see how the whole media, like when you just click, you pop up the CNN, the New York Times, and many other Western media, and they are totally talking against. So I think comparison to that's my personal opinion, that comparison to Russian propaganda, the Western propaganda is much, much stronger. And sometimes I doubt figures, to be honest. Like, as one of our friends said, that the Russian, the Ukrainian defense ministry confirmed that 600 casualties per day. It looks to me a little bit exaggeration, to be honest. Because that's what one party is claiming. When you talk to Russian, they may say, oh, there are 2,000 casualties, but from the other side. But the fact of the matter is that casualties are there. Human beings are being killing from both sides. So what I'm saying, that as a war, we are still in war, but somehow, as we witnessed two big invasions, many invasions, but two big, one from the Soviet and one from the NATO, that this invasion thing is not going to work. So better the UN plus other countries, big powers, which is acceptable to all parties, should come up with a practical, peace roadmap and find a solution. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster for the whole world, not only for Europe.
Thank you, Sadullah. And another interesting question that I wanted to ask to the panel, it's the difference between the approach of the two types of communication and propaganda. It's something that I already asked to Konstantin, but I wanted to ask to all of you. It's something that, because let's say that I know a lot Russian. I went to Russia many times for different reasons, also in Ukraine. I studied MGMO. So let's say that I have an approach that it's a little bit more inside the Russian mentality. But something that I don't understand, it's let's say there was in Christmas this commercial about RT that was showing Europe that is like, I don't know, dying to freeze in 3 years, that we will eat mouses and blah blah blah. Or for example, another type of communication that was, I don't know, during the Soloviev the first channel program, that why will not attack United Kingdom with the Poseidon and they will be destroyed completely in one day. I never heard something that is compared like this in the Western channel, like we will attack Moscow and we will destroy them in one day. It's something that I still don't understand in this type of approach. Can you explain me why the Russian propaganda needs to, let's say, be so much, or maybe exposing the people to a potential a threat from another nation?
Okay, so I guess I'll go. So first of all, you mentioned you finished MGMO. Yes, that's.
No, I made only like one master in Russian foreign policy in English for foreigners. It was only a summer program.
Okay, because I graduated there from international economic relations, bachelor's. So yeah, nice to see like what the close world or how it's called. Okay, whatever. So the way why this Russian propaganda is so militaristic, because what is the easiest way to unite people as a ruler of the country is to find a common enemy. If you have a common enemy, if you know that pretty much like there's America, there's Europe, there's another country, or in the end the entire world is against you, of course it's going to be easier to propagandize people saying we need to defend because everyone is against us, everyone is against Russia. If Russia loses in this small war, the whole entire culture of Russians, the whole entire nation of Russians will be, I don't know, like defeated. The whole way of living as a Russian will be defeated. So that's pretty much it. So you unite people by proposing such militaristic threats, by proposing such militaristic statements. You have to protect because otherwise. So, and just the aggression, because aggression is one of the earliest, one of the primal emotions of the human being. You cannot, I guess, avoid being aggressive if you are really seeing that everyone is aggressive around you. I know, like propaganda is saying enemy here, enemy there, and then you start feeling aggressive slash, I don't know, defensive, things like this. It's just basic nature. So like, I guess there was another country which was using these militaristic statements, militaristic slogans. There was an enemy in Austria. There's an enemy from another races. I think there was another country which did the same in like 1930s, 1940s. And I guess we all know how it ended, but pretty much history repeats itself.
I would also like to add to that. I agree, but also Russian government has nothing else to offer. It doesn't have any carrots because situation is pretty bad. All they have to offer is the image of the enemy, and they must keep on escalating more and more every week, every month. Otherwise, they just pump this fear into people more and more. And this is how they survive. Because if they don't do that, their picture of the world will just, fall apart in the minds of Russian people. Because they have nothing else to offer. Living standard has been eroding. And who is to blame? Either the government or for Russian people themselves, which they never do, or the enemy. The easiest is the enemy. There you go. There you have it.
Anatoly?
I think that people are overdoing it with the comparisons to Nazi Germany because I think they're just cretins for the most part because they don't have a consistent message. As I said, one day it's the Nazification, another day it's 666 genders and sex changes in the West, another day it's Satanism, another day it's some new bullshit. So I don't think there's actually any like consistent actual program, and it's also not backed by action, because I mean Nazi Germany was waging the war seriously. Like spending 40% of GDP at the war at the end, whereas, as I said, Russia is spending 5 to 10%. So there's also a major disjoint between like this weird rhetoric and actual actions on the ground, and what those translate to is that the war economy is not being set up. And in principle, I mean, to be honest, I'd actually rather discuss the military aspect, like comment on the military aspect, if that's okay. Basically, historically, wars have been won by the bigger coalition, the sides with the biggest GDP. So the Allies had a much bigger collective GDP than Germany and Japan, so they ended up winning. Right now, if you tally the numbers, Ukrainian GDP is 200 billion. They're spending a third of their GDP on the military, so that's 50 billion approximately, plus 100 billion in aid from NATO. Russia spending like maybe 7% of GDP, so out of 2 trillion, that's also 150 billion. So these are roughly equal numbers. all else equal, you would not expect radical sort of military advantage accruing to one side or the other, especially in the context in which indeed most armor has been destroyed by now, both the Soviet surplus that the ex-Warsaw Pact supplied to Ukraine and what Russia had in storage. It's a very infantry heavy war, reminiscent of World War I, Verdun, like brutal, idiotic frontal assaults, which don't really move the front line radically one way or another. Also, the nature of modern warfare, characterized by extreme surveillance capabilities. How did you achieve breakthroughs in previous wars? You had to concentrate your troops, right? Nowadays, it's much more difficult because the satellites see you concentrating your troops. The other side, which and everybody's motorized now. Logistics are vastly better than World War II. So they can quickly bring in reinforcements, and with whatever concentration you manage to do, it's sort of annulled very quickly in general. So attrition probably actually is the only way by now of waging the war. I mean, the chance to win the war quickly was presented itself in February, March, and the Russian army was not in a state to do so. They should have, if they were serious about it, they should have sent twice as many troops to do it. But right now, the reality is you have about 350,000 people on each side, infantry heavy, not much capacity to generate offensive potential. And so really attrition is the only choice. Now, the one thing I would note is that attrition does fundamentally favor Russia, simply because the manpower differential favors Russia. The population differential is 150 million to 35 million. On the other hand, the Ukrainians are obviously more motivated because they are the defending side. As regards casualties, Russian casualties are big, obviously, but the Media Zona project, which tags them, counts 15,000. They estimate that they detect 50% of them, so that's 30,000 at 10,000 from the Donbass, which do not come under the Media Zona project. That's around 40,000. And unfortunately, there's been no analogous project for tracking Ukrainian dead, but personally, I think it's 50,000 to 100,000, somewhere between there. I mean, but it's largely a black box. But according to a recent poll from the Zumkov Center, 17% of Ukrainians know a close one, Blisky, who died. So those are not insignificant figures. And bearing in mind that the Ukrainian population is obviously 4 times smaller than Russia's, that's pretty traumatic in relative terms. So the battle of attrition does favor Russia, but on the other hand, if Ukraine keeps becoming more coercive in terms of mobilization, the war can potentially still go on for many years, and that's not an outcome that either side would want to welcome at this point. So that's basically my opinion. That's the military situation. As regards Russia's propagandists, like state TV propagandists, I have a very low opinion of them. I don't think they're Hitlerites. They're not competent enough to be Hitlerites, to be frank.
Thank you, Anatoly. Another question that I want to give to everybody, it's let's say about the real military outcome of this war, how was presented, because I'm talking with a lot of people from all over the world. For example, let's say the Russian supporters say to me, the war started in 2014. In my opinion, all the situation of Ukraine, it's far beyond 1991. Because we are looking to the diaries of Chernayev, that was like one council of Gorbachev. They were already talking before the referendum of December 1991 of the independence of Ukraine from the Soviet Union, that the big deal was to maintain let's say an internal threat in Ukraine, in Donbass and in Crimea. So they were talking about it still at the end of the Soviet Union. So to maintain, let's say, a potential pro-Russian party inside these two oblasts. But the interesting thing that it was for me that when I wanted to show you because it's interesting, super fast, and then I will ask you the question. If we look about the referendum, this was the referendum in 1991. The interesting data is that also in Lugansk and Donetsk, 83% was pro-independence of Ukraine and Soviet Union, and also Sevastopol and Crimea was over 50%. This is the same data about the no of the independence of the Ukraine from the Soviet Union. If we have this, let's say, info, this data, it's difficult to manage a position where I'm saying that, let's say, this population wanted to go out of this nation after 20, 30 years. What I wanted to ask you, is it possible that inside the same Ukraine there was a division between two groups? Let's say that the Ukrainian people grow up in a different way of the Russian people inside the Federation, the Russian Federation. Concluding, is it possible that there is, like in the Russian mindset, that Ukraine, it's still, let's say, a part of Russia, of Ruski Mir, and in the Ukrainian mentality, for sure the Ukrainian government actually were not a part of this Russian war anymore. Konstantin, if you want to answer.
Look, I have quite extensive experience with Ukraine. I spent about a year in Ukraine. I used to work for power facility construction holding company that was based in Ukraine, headquartered in Ukraine, in Odessa. So I have lived in Odessa for about a year. In Zaporizhzhia, I managed a large manufacturing plant, electrotechnical equipment in Kharkov, in Kharkov, Zaporizhzhia, and Kiev. And Odessa was my main base in Ukraine. Well, let me tell you something. Ukrainians, for as long as I can remember, since, well, when I first came to Ukraine in 1998, they considered themselves an independent country, not part of the world, and they lived their own life. They were very culturally close to Russia. I never felt like I was in a foreign country every time I came to Ukraine. Everyone spoke Russian with pretty much same accent as I speak Russian, because I was born and raised in Rostov-on-Don, which is, you know, right next to Ukrainian border. So we speak southern accent there. That differs from Moscow and from the north of Russia, okay? So I never felt like I was not at home. Country-wise, culture-wise, and people-wise. People were absolutely same as us. And they never had any hard... I never faced one situation in Ukraine when somebody would tell me, hey, you're Russian. On the contrary, people were so interested, so sympathetic, so, you know, genuinely interested in Russia and everything Russian. It did feel like one cultural space, but the countries were absolutely different. Ukrainians had their own politicians, their own politics, their own agenda, their own vision for the country, and so forth. So don't make mistake about that. They always felt like they were a sovereign, independent nation. In Russia, people really didn't care about Ukraine that much until recent events, I'd say 2014. Because most Russians understood that Ukrainians are sovereign, independent. They are a country of their own, and they can do whatever they want inside their countries. If they want to be to side with reptiloids, they can side with reptiloids. If they want to side with Nazis, they can side with Nazis. If they want to side with Martians, well, that's their land, you know. They have crooked politicians, trust me. Corruption in Ukraine, even higher than in Russia, or at least it was before the war, okay? I know, I've been there before and I've seen it. But it's their country, it's their politician, it's their voters. They are free to choose whatever model of economy, whatever model of politics that they wish. That's an independent country, okay? And I think that an idea was born in the heads of Russian leadership, or in the head of one leader, that Ukraine somehow should belong to Russian sphere of influence, okay? For some weird reasons. I don't understand what these reasons are. And I think that's where the root of all problems. Yes, Ukraine did turn to Europe, but it was taken with such a pain in Russia. It started military actions, okay, that it had no right to. But the thing is, Ukraine had all the rights to do whatever they wanted to do. They want to become part of NATO. Hey, you know, no one said anything when Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia became part of NATO. Italy became part of NATO. You know, how would you like if we come to Italy and say, hey, you can't do that? No, you're a threat to us, you know, do such and such. Yeah, that's basically what we've done to Ukraine, okay? What's the difference between Italy and Ukraine? Nothing. None. So that's basically my opinion in a very nutshell.
Konstantin, but also for the others, I will put one military question, and only just to make the last 10-15 minutes and close and don't take a lot of time to you all. The question is, the actual outcome, it's a military stalemate, and as Anatoly said, it's a little bit actually without any counteroffensive, is still like a Korean, let's say, situation. Let's see what will happen. For the Russian dude, I have a question for you. The political outcome, in my point of view, it's that the Russian government probably was expecting a fragmentation of the European nation, not a unity, and also the actual outcome, it's but for me it's more problematic for the Russian security than Ukraine. It's the let's say Finland and Sweden asking to enter in NATO. When I wanted to ask your opinion, especially Finland, because I didn't know before going to study in Norway that Finland is upset about let's say Russian, still from the Winter War, and it's the only military in. If you check like the balance between the military spending and the GDP, Finland is the first in Europe compared to the population and GDP, because they have the biggest border with Russia. I don't know if it's over 800 kilometers, something like this. And it's very difficult to defend, and it's the only street that is going from Peter to Murmansk, that it's the only port that is usable by Russia, that it's not freezing during the winter. It's completely on the border of Finland. So if Finland will enter in NATO, and I was, let's say, expecting to be more secure than after. Now I will have not only the problem of Ukraine, but also all the border with Finland that will be a NATO member soon, I think, when Turkey will allow Finland and Sweden to enter. In adding to this question, I have two military questions for you. One, the Russian dude, and the other is about the possible retreat from Bakhmut. Zaluzny, UK say that getting out of Bakhmut since weeks, while it seems Zelensky handlers made decision to put more troops there. So your opinion. And the other one is With this large Russian build-up forces and the offensive not quite happening, is it possible that they are waiting for the Ukrainian spring offensive to happen first, then counterattack?
Okay, so speaking about the first question about whether Ukrainians retreating or not retreating from Bakhmut, should they do it, should they not? Zelensky himself was saying, we will defend Bakhmut for as long as it makes sense. If we see that pretty much losses are significant from Ukrainian side, obviously, if we see that Russians are definitely pushing, if we see that we are being surrounded, we will retreat because it is not that much strategically important city. But the reason, one of the reasons, not the main reason maybe, but one of the reasons why they still keep defending it is just, once again, it is just the very good place, I guess that's the word, for Ukrainians to deplete Russian forces. Once again, defending is always easier than attacking, and Russians, they want Bakhmut because this became symbolic city for them. Even my grandmother, she doesn't even know where Bakhmut is, she never heard about it. But last time we spoke with her, she was like, hey, did you hear Russians are getting closer to Bakhmut? I was like, yeah, can you show me Bakhmut on the map to begin with?
The Russian
Okay,
dude,
whatever.
they said 5 times already that they've taken over Bakhmut.
That's
know.
the so you get the idea basically. So pretty much, yes, this became symbolic city for them. This is not much about strategically military advancement or advantages that it will give them because of the intersections of the highways that this Bakhmut city lies upon. No, this is more already a strategic city, so that Russian government, Putin, he wanted to say it during the anniversary invasion, which, by the way, he never did even any announcements during the anniversary because there was nothing even to talk about. He wanted to say on February 23rd, the defender of the motherland, one of the most patriotic holidays in Russia. Today, my fellow Russian citizens, we did a massive victory in Ukraine. We captured the city of Bakhmut. They were not able to do it. They were not able to claim this victory, nothing like this. And so right now we can see slowly Bakhmut disappearing from the media. Less and less people talk about it. There is not much news coming from Russian media about Bakhmut or anything in the east. It's more towards now, I don't know, like this address of the Putin to the Federal Assembly or anything like this, the preparations for the victory parade, obviously, another morale boost in a couple of months. But so far, yes, Zelensky coming back all the way, circling back to Zelensky, he said, we will defend it for as long as it is strategic, for as long as it makes sense. Russians are attacking, they want to capture this symbolic city. Okay, let them do it, we'll just protect ourselves, we'll ambush them, we'll surround small assault groups that they're sending every single day, waves after waves after waves. As soon as we see that, okay, maybe Russians start to make progress, even if they start doing this, it's still uncertain if they will be able to do it or not, or maybe they'll just give up on Bakhmut completely. And then pretty much that's it. If they see it's no longer viable to hold the city, they'll just retreat a little bit further. Like, if you zoom out the map of Ukraine, this Bakhmut, which is, I don't know, like dozen kilometers maximum, this area, dozen square kilometers, which have been intense fighting in the last half year. But if you zoom out, this is like, what, 0.01% of Ukraine's territory? Like, remember Kharkiv counteroffensive, Kherson counteroffensive. Ukraine took almost the entire regions, like half of the entire Kherson, all the way to the right side of Dnipro River in like, what, less than a week. This is how you perform counteroffensive, offensive, or like any other military operations. This is how you do it, not struggling for like 100 meters in 2 months or anything like this. So for this reason, yeah. I even forgot the original question, but long story short.
Yes, the other question was that maybe the Russian is not starting any type of offensive now, real offensive, and they asked if they are waiting for the Ukrainians and counteroffensive. But this is all military questions because nobody knows.
Pretty much yes. When was the last successful Russian offensive? I'm not even going to call it counteroffensive because Russia is not defending to be counterattacking. So when was the last successful Russian offensive? Yes, they took Solidar, just one settlement. Yes, they maybe took in the beginning of the war Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, And that's pretty much it. I've been following this war every single day, making videos daily, literally every single day. And I can only name these 3 settlements which Russians captured since the beginning of this war. So, long story short, time is on Ukraine's side. Russia might be, I don't know, whatever they're doing in Bakhmut in the east right now. Ukrainians are about to receive NATO weapons, longer range missiles, which allegedly they already use them, not officially yet, but we have some reports about explosions in Mariupol, and the distance from the front lines allows us to assume that this was used by longer range missiles than regular HIMARS. And so, long story short, yeah, as soon as the Western military vehicles, tanks, armored personnel carriers start to arrive, as soon as it's not that much mud and slash in the ground, I mean, there's almost no way for Russians to attack, to advance anywhere or anything. So I think we are getting very close to the culmination of the Russian offensive in the east. Maybe not the entire war yet, but maybe we will see hopefully some good positive changes in the east of Ukraine in the next couple of months or so.
Okay, and maybe for the others, a political answer about the expanding of NATO of Finland and Sweden, but historically they are neutral and they didn't want to join NATO, and now they are, let's say, internally forced to join NATO, maybe because they are against, afraid of a Russian invasion.
Is this to me as well?
It's up to you or the other side. It's the same.
No, I can say just a couple of words to give some time to other presenters as well, so it's not just me. So like you, I think already mentioned this, one of the original goals of Russia in this war, which has already been changing also like several times. Even I kind of don't know the main goal of Russia in Ukraine. It always changes. But one of them was that to prevent NATO from expansion, to push NATO further away from Russian borders, and now what do we have? 2 more countries potentially with very high probability joining NATO, one of them being Finland, which is, like you mentioned, right next to Russian borders. So I guess they kind of failed, to say the least, in this goal of their special military operation, which is obviously a war. But yeah, let's see what other people think.
If I can add something to this, also to the others, Anatoly and Konstantin. For me, it was very sad to analyze like the Russian propaganda at the beginning to call a threat that if Ukraine will be a NATO member, it's a bigger threat for Russia. But at the moment, like all the Baltic states are inside NATO from many years. And if we check like the distance between, for example, Tallinn and Peter, it's much smaller than from Ukraine to, let's say, Moscow. So if NATO wanted to be like a threat to Russia, they were able to put a lot of weapons in the Baltic states, and it's, I don't know, 4 hours by car from the border. So I didn't get what was like the type of threat that was more from Ukraine than from the Baltic states.
Look, there was never a threat from Ukraine to Russia. Russia is a large nuclear power. There is no threat to Russia from anyone, because if someone invades Russia, it will be dealt swiftly with a counter-nuclear strike. So only a person absolutely stupid, uneducated, dark, can believe that NATO expansion is a threat to Russia into Ukraine. Okay, there are a couple questions I always ask people who tell me that, oh, but NATO, you know. First of all, NATO has been on the Russian borders for decades. Turkey has been a part of NATO, and Turkey has American base called Incirlik, and it carries nuclear weapons, nuclear rockets. It's a very short flight to Russia, and it's right on Russia's border and on Soviet border. No one made a fuss about Turkey being a part of NATO. Then there was expansion of NATO into Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. You're spot on. You're absolutely right. And if they cared about NATO as a threat to Russia, they would be screaming and shouting loud back then, saying, hey, It's only like 3-hour drive to St. Petersburg. Come on, what are you doing? And so forth. No, they welcomed it. Moreover, Russia wanted to become part of NATO. If you remember, that was main Putin's theme in 2000, 2001, and 2002. He was publicly saying, oh, Russia's mission is to become part of the West and join NATO. Okay? Public. I'm not, you can go and check the records.
If I can add to you, a lot of meeting was NATO plus Russia. When there was like, let's say, military agreement, also when there was like the Twin Towers, with the Iraq invasion and whatever, there was all with agreement with Russia, because they used like the base in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan or whatever, only with agreement of Russia, because without the agreement, they will not use Central Asia as a, let's say, pickup basis for Iraq.
And you're right. And it was never about NATO. It was never about NATO. It was about Russian leadership, Vladimir Putin and his friends, his inner circle, losing the grip on Ukraine. That's what it was all about. NATO, they just sold this idea as a sexy idea to Russian people. Plain and simple. And Russian people, well, I'll leave that without a comment, but they bought it. They bought it with a smile, okay? And this has been dominating propaganda theme. It was first about Nazification and militarization of Ukraine for the first, couple months perhaps. And then they simply forgot about that. Like it never happened. They never said anything about that. Oh, what Nazification? What denazification? What demilitarization? We're against evil Nazi West. Now it's been a consistent message from Russian government, from Russian propaganda for the past at least 6 months. Consistent. Every day they are selling us this idea of Nazis run the Western governments and the usurped Western countries' people. Westerners are victims of their governments, okay? I hear it every single day. Very consistent, very direct idea. NATO has become everything. Ukraine has shrunk. Ukraine is not important anymore. But in reality, in the beginning, it was all about Ukraine. They just used NATO as, they didn't even use NATO at first. They used Ukraine, saying denazify and demilitarize. NATO appeared after they failed their first agenda.
The last question, and also for Anatoly, Karlin, I think that the other effect of this invasion during the Trump government, Trump started to, let's say, trying to push the European government to spend more money in the military spending, also inside NATO, because US said that they don't want to pay more for the European protection, NATO, blah, blah, blah. All the European states say, no, we don't want to spend more money in military, blah, blah, blah. And the actual response of this threat, it's that all the nation in Europe is starting to spend a lot of money more in military. That, let's say, for the people, maybe it's not so good because we have less spending in healthcare, school, or whatever. But what is happening, it's probably the worst thing that the Russian Federation was waiting. Like, we were not spending more money in new military as before, and now they are peaking it at 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% of the GDP. So what is your opinion about this? And when Anatoly Karlin was talking about the GDP, I think that if we sum the GDP of the NATO at the moment, it's about 40 times or at least 35 times more of the Russian Federation. Also, if we put China over Russia, and I'm pretty sure that China will not support technically Russia, because the balance of the trade between Russia and China, it's very low. Like Russia, it's a huge importer from China, but for China, Russia, it's like a junior partner. It's not in the first 10 commercial partner of China. What could be, let's say, in the Russian reaction and in the Russian population, the answering of this European Union rearming themselves, because probably it's not what it was waiting from the beginning of the war. Especially Anatoly, if I can put, like Germany was not rearming themselves from the Second World War.
I think it's gradually emerging that most of those sort of commitments are empty and they're not actually going to happen, simply because the Europeans are observing the difficulties Russia is having conquering cities which are practically on its borders. So why should Berlin be worried about Russia? I mean, there's arguably much less cause to be worried about Russia from a purely military perspective now than there was like a year and a month ago. I mean, I don't think that's surprising at all. One thing I'd point out is that regarding the entire NATO discussion, I mean, there's aspects of what the speaker said that were correct, but aspects were not. I mean, the West was expanding NATO, but Putin was indeed in the beginning interested, sending feelers about joining NATO as well, and he was rebuffed in no uncertain terms. And probably the whole skepticism towards the project stems to that either, because I mean there were verbal commitments made to Gorbachev that there would be no NATO expansion, and those were broken. So taken together, I don't think it's that surprising that there was this reaction eventually, and especially once it came to Ukraine. I mean, at the end of the day, you can sort of like blame Russia unilaterally, but the Ukrainians were shutting down pro-Russian media outlets. They were like taking out Russian language education progressively. And since Russia visualizes itself as a great power that out to have a sphere of influence, it's not surprising that it had this allergic reaction to the events taking place in Ukraine, especially bearing in mind that it's spent something like $200 billion in gas subsidies on the place since the end of the Soviet Union. And you can like it or not, but at the end of the day, these are just the geopolitical realities that big countries and countries that are powerful or consider themselves powerful at any rate, they do expect to have a sphere of influence, especially over places which border them and which are culturally close to them. So the US sort of claims a sphere of influence over the entirety of Latin America, if not the entire world. China claims a sphere of influence over Taiwan, over the South China Sea. So it's not that surprising that Russia at least tries to claim something similar over the sort of Lusophone populations of Ukraine, Belarus, and so forth. Those are my comments on NATO. I don't think that the Europeans are actually going to be spending more money. I mean, the Germans are sort of already retreating from those commitments to their spending simply because they saw that Russia is contrary to its pre-war delusions as a paper tiger or paper bear in terms of military terms relative to pre-war expectations. Regarding China. This is a difficult problem because arguably, if it ends in a stalemate in which Russia is stanched from the West to a much greater degree than before the war, then this will arguably be good for China because then Russia will be more pliant towards China, more dependent on China. On the other hand, in the event that Russia suffers a big military defeat in Ukraine, it could also end very badly for China because a total military defeat in Ukraine will, in my opinion, likely lead to the overthrow of the Putin regime eventually. The chance that Russia sort of drifts into the Western orbit, the Western sphere of influence. And in this scenario, China ends up essentially surrounded on all sides, right? India, Japan, Russia, and the US. And China seems to have some territorial pretensions towards Taiwan. It seems to have some ambitions to challenge US global hegemony later in the century. And how it's going to be doing that without a secure northern flank remains something of a mystery to me. So I'm slightly surprised that China hasn't aided Russia more. I do think that in the event that Russia faces a real military crisis, then China will step up diplomatic efforts to sort of salvage the situation for Russia. But if it sort of remains on the sidelines, then things go badly for Russia, then it could actually end up, in my opinion, very badly for China eventually.
Okay, the last question just to close, and then still hoping, because I have friends both sides, so I still very hoping that the peace will arrive soon. I am praying every time that this day will come as soon as possible. But the last military question for all and the closing. Today we have a lot of news, mainly in Italy, about the use of drones in the Russian soil, and about yesterday, the day before, also today. Ukrainian drones were claimed by the Russian official and the Minister of Defense that they were, let's say, intercepted in Crimea, but also in a village that was 80 kilometers southeast of Moscow. Do you think, and these drones, they were claimed that they were not able to carry any type of weapons? What do you think that is like the use of this type of drones at this part of the conflict inside the Russian soil? Russian dude, if you can.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So long story short, one of the main, it does not matter even if they have some, how it's called, weapons carrying them or no. One of the main ideas is to show that Russia is not impenetrable. So to show that Ukrainians, if they want, they can launch their aerial vehicles, not planes, maybe not helicopters, obviously, but something even as small as drones. They can launch them inside Russia, not being intercepted, to show the inferiority, I guess that's the word, of the Russian air defense system, which they claim like, oh, we're going to intercept everything, like we have the most modern weapons in the world, we're the second army in the world, which, by the way, one of the greatest achievements of Ukrainians so far was to destroy this myth that it's not the second army of the world. But coming back to the drone situation, once again, it's also very hard to believe anything that comes from the Russian Ministry of Defense or Russian propaganda. They were talking about this drone which fell next to Gazprom infrastructure facility to, I don't remember what is this, like a oil storage or something like this, or gas pumps, something like this, long story short. So the drone fell like 100 meters away from this place, and Russians found it, said like, oh, it was loaded with weapons. But you know, this drone's range is only 100 kilometers. The closest distance, even if Ukrainians launched this drone all the way from the north of Ukraine, like from some northern districts of Kiev, this is like 450 kilometers away. So whenever Russians say that the range of this drone is only 100 kilometers, I mean, it takes 5 seconds to see that somebody is lying. And well, there is drone, and so pretty much that the statement of the Russian Ministry of Defense was most likely fake one. The another thing, like all these like airfields in the past couple of months ago, Engels airfield was constantly under drone attacks. Yesterday was Yeisk airfield also under drone attacks. And all the time Russian Ministry of Defense says, no, this was just like, I don't know, military training, or this is what just our like exercising, like preventing, exercising, practicing, doing air defense, something like this. I mean, like, so why there's a fire then? Why there's like explosions then? Another thing, yesterday or 2 days ago, there was so this is the most complicated word for me in English, unidentified object was flying above St. Petersburg, and the Russian government, they even took some couple of fighter jets to find and intercept it. The whole St. Petersburg airport, Pulkovo, was closed. The airspace above St. Petersburg was closed. And then they were like, well, we didn't find anything, so cancel everything, cancel the alarm. And then they said, like, I don't know, 1 hour later or something, this was just pretty much, we were practicing once again our air defense systems. The whole north of Russia was like, so what is this? What is that? Where is this object? What's happening? And then they're like fighter jets in the skies and everything. And they're like, no, we're just practicing air defense. And then there was like, okay, so we will continue our practice. The next day, March 1st, we will do the radio transmissions, like on the radio, like this air raid sirens. We're going to practice them. And today, one of the first news I read today, they're like, well, actually, there is no need to do this. We know they're working. So as you can see, so many contradictions, so many like, so pretty much, yeah. One of them, back to the original to close my statement so it makes sense. One of the original things, one of the original ideas why Ukraine drones are flying towards Russia, sometimes they hit their target, sometimes they don't, is to once again show that Russian air defense is not that superior as Russians claim. So yeah.
Okay, so just to closing and say a closing message and still
A
thank
couple
you.
words. Can I add a couple things?
For sure, Konstantin.
The Russian dude, it's really hard to disagree with you on many things, on most things, except for one. I hugely disagree. Ukrainians did not prove that Russia is not the number 2 army in the world. Is not the number 2. They did not destroy the myth. Russians have destroyed the myth themselves. Okay, I think this is much more appropriate way to say that. Ukrainians just defending their land. They're doing their job, basically, you know. But it's the Russians who themselves shot themselves in the feet, and they have destroyed the myth of their own army.
If you think about correct, yes, I agree. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, just to thank everybody for the participation, Anatoly, Karlin, Russian Dude, Konstantin inside Russia. I will send you the closing message because we were co-hosted by Mazzarino Geopolitics, and this night we were also in New World Econ. On March 11th, we will have like the episode 2 of this panel. And Russian Dude, if you want to come, it will be more military analyst, so there will be war in Ukraine, military summary, defense politics Asia, New World Econ. So everybody that want to come, also Konstantin, Anatoly, everybody, it will be a little bit a mess because it will be entering, exiting different time zones. For all the others that were watching our streams from May, we are finalizing the activity for opening the geopolitical school that will be in person, not live, but for the people that cannot join us, will be also in an hybrid version. It will be probably in October 2023 on Garda Lake in Italy. The idea is to make it for free. So we will make, let's say, a selection for all the people worldwide that we want to join. The teacher will be a part of the selected group of the speaker of this channel, plus there will be like international politics speaker from all over the world. So I think that will be a good chance to create, let's say, some dialogue that I'm seeing that it was missing in these years. Probably if we were solving this situation in diplomacy, we had a lot of young people not died on the field at this moment. This is why I'm very afraid of this situation, because we are talking about two sides, but on the field there is like young people that is dying at the moment, and so it's very sad, both sides. So thank you everybody that was participating. If you have any type of question, just put in the comments. Russian Dude, Anatoly, Karlin, Konstantin inside Russia, and before Eirik and the thanks, and Asadullah Faranzai. Thank you to everybody. Stay 1 second because I'm closing, and then I will tell you if you have to say anything, just say, and then I close.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I do think some degree of epistemic humility about this entire affair is probably in order, because in my opinion, probably the two best purely military analysts are Michael Kaufman on Twitter and Igor Stelkov, Girkin. And both of them, frankly, don't know what's going to happen. They sort of take a lot of care to hedge their various predictions. It's really hard to say what's
Send to me, Anatoly, the
what's going to be
contact.
happening. But yeah,
I will try to invite them.
I will not
Okay,
participate in the stream where Girkin is going to be present. I'm sorry. I will not participate.
No, but I think, Konstantin, I think that the panel, let's say, just for you to understand, because it will be in English, it's already full of invitates that 1 of March. So it will be, as I repeated to you all, for the people that it's online. It will be New York Econ War Report, Defense Politic Asia, Military Summary, and probably also Alex History Legends and the Russian Dude if you want to come, but it will be already 5-6 people. So for that streams, it's already more than enough.
I know, but I'm just making a point. In any future streams where if Girkin, before inviting him, you should learn who the guy is. What piece of crap he is.
I was trying to closing like in a polite way the group. So thank you to everybody. Wait 1 second, but I'm closing, and thank to everybody.